They thought she was weak, just because she was blind. 4 police officers mocked and pushed her in the middle of the street. But seconds later, she left them all on the ground, shocked, humiliated, and begging for mercy. You won't believe what happened next. The afternoon air was heavy with the buzz of downtown traffic as Amara Johnson walked with steady, cautious steps, her white cane tapping against the pavement. At 17, she had grown used to the rhythm of city streets, her sharp ears replacing the eyes she had lost years ago. To strangers, she looked vulnerable, alone, small, and blind. But Amara carried a quiet strength, one hidden beneath her calm exterior. As she crossed the plaza, she sensed a sudden shift in the air. Footsteps echoed around her, firm and deliberate, not the casual shuffle of passers-by. The voices came next, sharp, commanding, filled with authority. "Hey, you don't belong here," barked Officer Carter, his voice carrying the weight of dominance. He was the leader of the 4 officers now surrounding her. "Walking around like this is some kind of act," sneered Officer Daniels, a cruel laugh following his words. "Maybe she's pretending," added Officer Harris, trying to impress the others with his mockery. "Pathetic," muttered Officer Blake, his tone colder than steel. Amara's grip tightened on her cane. She couldn't see their uniforms, but she felt the menace in their presence. The crowd nearby began to hush, phones slowly being raised as onlookers realized what was happening. Carter stepped closer, grabbing Amara by the hoodie and yanking her forward. "Get out of here," he shouted in her face. His spit hit her cheek as the others stood watching, smirking at her humiliation. Amara's heart pounded, but not with fear. Beneath her calm breathing, a memory surfaced, her late father's voice teaching her self-defense drills, telling her that blindness wasn't weakness. Her muscles tightened. She wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Something inside her whispered, "They just made a mistake." The crowd grew restless as Officer Carter held Amara by her hoodie, his face twisted in anger. His grip was harsh, but what truly stung was the laughter of his partners. Daniels chuckled loudly, circling her like a predator mocking prey. Harris whispered something under his breath, earning a nod of approval from Blake, who simply folded his arms and watched like a judge enjoying the show. "Look at her," Daniels sneered. "She doesn't even know where to look. What's she gonna do, swing that stick at us?" The words sparked a cruel chorus of laughter. Carter shoved her back roughly, expecting her to stumble helplessly. Instead, Amara steadied herself, her cane planted firmly on the ground. She took a slow breath, listening, really listening. The shuffle of Carter's polished shoes told her he was standing directly in front of her. Blake's heavier stance remained to her right, while Harris nervously shifted on the left. Daniels paced behind, the sound of his belt and keys betraying his position. Her father's lessons came back vividly. Sight is one sense, but awareness is power. Trust what you hear. Trust what you feel. Carter lunged forward again, reaching to grab her. This time, Amara moved. With a sharp twist of her body, she swung her cane upward, striking Carter's wrist with precise force. The crowd gasped as the officer's hand flew open, pain shooting through his arm. "What the?" Carter staggered, holding his wrist, his face contorted with shock. Amara's expression remained calm, her lips pressed into a determined line. "You should never underestimate someone just because you can't see what they're capable of," she said, her voice low but steady. The crowd erupted in murmurs. The officers exchanged glances. The game had just changed. The plaza had grown silent, except for the echo of Officer Carter's pained groan. He glared at Amara, clutching his wrist as though he couldn't believe she had just struck him. Around them, the small crowd whispered in shock, phones held high to record what had just unfolded. "Are you kidding me?" Carter spat, his face red with fury. "She hit me." Officer Daniels barked out a laugh, though it was edged with unease. "Guess the little blind girl's got some bite." Officer Harris stepped forward quickly, puffing out his chest to regain control. "Let's end this before people start thinking she's stronger than us." His voice carried both bravado and nervousness, as if he needed the other's approval. Blake's cold eyes narrowed, his arms still crossed. Careful. She's not flailing. She knows exactly where we are. That wasn't luck." His words were calm, but they dripped with disdain. Amara turned her head slightly, her ears tuning into every sound. The shuffle of Harris's shoes was faster, more erratic. Daniels tapped something metal against his belt, a habit betraying his nerves. Blake barely moved, his breath steady, controlled, and Carter, angry Carter, was too focused on revenge to think straight. "You think one lucky swing makes you powerful?" Carter growled, stepping back in. "I'll show you who's in charge here." The crowd gasped again as Carter lunged, but Amara sidestepped at the last second, guided by the rhythm of his footsteps. With fluid precision, she jabbed her cane backward, catching Daniels in the gut, just as he tried to sneak up behind her. Daniels staggered, clutching his stomach, the air knocked out of him. The onlookers erupted in cheers now, their voices rising in support. Amara stood firm, breathing evenly. The circle of power was shifting fast. The atmosphere in the plaza had changed. Moments ago, the officers were the hunters circling their prey. Now the roles were blurring. Amara Johnson stood tall, her cane steady at her side, while two of the officers were already clutching injuries. "Get up, Daniels," barked Officer Carter, his pride bruised as much as his wrist. Daniels straightened slowly, still gasping for breath, his eyes narrowing with humiliation. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. "She's blind," someone whispered in awe. "And she's handling them." Amara tilted her head, her braids brushing her cheek as she listened. Carter's angry breathing was close. He was itching to strike again. Daniels shuffled behind her, slower now, cautious. Harris's steps betrayed his nerves, pacing from side to side like a dog unsure if it should bark or bite. Blake remained quiet, his heavy stance unmoving, as though calculating. "You think this makes you brave?" Carter sneered. "You think people will cheer for you when you're on the ground?" Amara's lips curved slightly. "I don't need their cheers. I just need you to stop underestimating me." Her calm tone rattled Harris. He lunged suddenly, reaching for her arm. But Amara twisted, lowering herself as her cane whipped around in a sharp arc. It cracked against Harris's shin with precision. He yelped and stumbled back, clutching his leg. The crowd cheered louder now, some even shouting her name after hearing bystanders repeat it. Daniels cursed under his breath. "She's making a fool of us in front of everyone." For the first time, Carter hesitated. The balance of fear had shifted, not in Amara, but in them. Blake finally uncrossed his arms, stepping forward with a cold smile. "Enough playing around. It's my turn." The crowd hushed again. The real fight was just beginning. The air seemed to freeze as Officer Blake finally moved. Unlike Carter's explosive anger or Harris's clumsy bravado, Blake radiated cold precision. He didn't rush. He didn't mock. He simply adjusted his cuffs and walked toward Amara Johnson with the quiet confidence of a predator closing in. The crowd sensed the danger. Phones zoomed in. A woman whispered, "That one's different. He looks like he actually knows how to fight." Amara shifted her stance, her grip on the cane tightening. Blake's footsteps were measured, his boots hitting the pavement with slow, deliberate rhythm. She followed each sound, mapping his approach in her mind. "You've embarrassed them," Blake said evenly, his voice devoid of humor. "But me? I don't get embarrassed. I win." Amara tilted her head, her ears sharp. "Overconfidence sounds the same as fear, you know. Just quieter." A murmur rippled through the crowd at her words. Blake struck without warning, sweeping low to knock her off her feet. But Amara reacted instantly, leaping back, her cane slamming down across his arm. The sharp crack echoed, but Blake didn't flinch. He caught the cane mid-strike, his grip like iron. The crowd gasped. For a second, it seemed he had her weapon under control. Carter smirked in the background, relieved. Daniels chuckled hoarsely, clutching his stomach, and Harris limped but grinned. But Amara wasn't done. Instead of pulling back, she twisted the cane sharply, using Blake's grip against him. With a swift pivot, she turned her body, jerking the cane upward and smashing the end into his jaw. Blake staggered, his cold demeanor cracking as pain flashed across his face. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others screaming in disbelief. Amara's expression remained steady. "You don't win today." Blood trickled from the corner of Officer Blake's mouth as he staggered back, his icy composure broken for the first time. The crowd roared with approval, phones held higher now, every angle capturing the clash between one blind girl and 4 armed officers. Officer Carter's face twisted with rage. "Enough of this, she's humiliating us." He motioned to the others. "We take her down together." Amara heard the subtle shuffle as 3 pairs of boots moved in at once. Daniel's uneven breathing to her left, Harris dragging his injured leg to the right, and Carter storming forward from the front. Blake lingered behind, recovering but still dangerous. Her heartbeat quickened, but her mind was calm. She adjusted her stance, lowering her body slightly, every sense tuned to the rhythm around her. Left, right, front. Daniel struck first, grabbing for her shoulder. Amara dropped low, her cane swinging up sharply to slam against his ribs. He cried out, stumbling sideways. Almost instantly, Carter lunged, his fists swinging wildly. Amara pivoted, listening to the rush of air his punch made, then spun, driving the tip of her cane into his midsection. The impact forced him back, wheezing. Harris, desperate to prove himself, charged in clumsily. Amara sidestepped, planting her cane behind his leg and sweeping. Harris tumbled hard to the pavement, groaning as laughter broke from the crowd. For a moment, silence followed. 3 officers writhed in pain around her, and only Blake remained standing. The crowd began chanting, voices overlapping, "Amara! Amara!" Blake wiped the blood from his jaw, glaring at her. "You think they'll save you?" he asked coldly, nodding toward the cheering crowd. "They'll film, they'll shout, but when this is over you'll still be broken." Amara lifted her chin. "Only if you can break me." The chants of the crowd echoed across the plaza, filling the air with a charged energy. Yet Officer Blake didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Amara Johnson, cold and calculating, as if the voices of dozens of people meant nothing. "You're clever," he said evenly, circling her like a predator. "But clever isn't enough." Amara tilted her head, tracking him through sound. The scrape of his shoes on concrete, the subtle creak of his belt, every detail painted a picture in her mind. She steadied her breathing. Blake moved fast, faster than the others. His fist sliced through the air, a sharp rush of wind. Amara ducked, her cane sweeping upward to deflect, but Blake anticipated. He caught the cane mid-swing and twisted, wrenching it violently. The crowd gasped as Amara stumbled, forced to release her grip. The cane clattered across the ground. "She's disarmed!" Carter shouted, his voice cracking with excitement despite the pain in his ribs. Daniels and Harris, still hunched over, smirked weakly, their pride returning at the sight. Blake tossed the cane aside, his lips curling into a thin smile. "Now you're truly blind." For a heartbeat, the plaza held its breath. Amara stood motionless, her hands free, her face calm. Then she raised her chin. "Blindness doesn't mean weakness. You'll see that soon enough." The crowd roared in support, stomping and clapping, their energy feeding her resolve. Blake lunged again, but this time Amara moved differently. She dropped low, listening not to the sound of his fists, but to the rhythm of his breathing, the subtle shift of weight in his stride. Her palm shot upward, striking under his chin with precise force. Blake staggered back, stunned. Unarmed, Amara had just proven she didn't need the cane to fight. The plaza exploded with noise as Amara Johnson's strike landed cleanly, sending Officer Blake stumbling backward. For the first time, his cold mask cracked. His jaw clenched as he steadied himself, glaring at her with quiet fury. Carter shouted from the ground, spitting venom through his anger. "She's mocking us! Don't just stand there, finish her!" Blake wiped his mouth, his voice low and sharp. "I will." Amara stood still, her chest rising and falling steadily. Though her cane lay far from reach, her mind replayed the lessons her father drilled into her. If they take away your tool, your body becomes the weapon. Blake lunged again, but Amara sidestepped, listening to the whisper of his clothes and the thud of his boots. Her elbow shot out, striking his ribs. He grunted, but recovered quickly, spinning to grab her arm. His grip tightened, twisting painfully. The crowd gasped as Amara's face tensed. Blake leaned close, his breath harsh. "You're strong, but strength won't save you." Amara gritted her teeth. Then, with sudden force, she dropped her weight, twisting her trapped arm in the opposite direction. The movement caught Blake off guard. In one fluid motion, she threw him over her shoulder. The plaza erupted in cheers as Blake crashed hard onto the pavement. Even Carter's eyes widened in shock. Daniels and Harris exchanged nervous glances, their earlier confidence crumbling. Phones flashed everywhere, recording every angle. Amara straightened, her stance firm, her voice cutting through the noise. "You don't understand. Every day of my life has been a fight, against doubt, against pity, against people like you, and I never lost." The crowd roared, her words striking deeper than her blows. For the first time, the officers looked less like enforcers and more like the defeated. The scene was electric. Phones stayed raised high, capturing every second as Amara Johnson stood tall, while 3 officers groaned in pain and Officer Blake struggled to rise after being slammed to the ground. The chants of the crowd grew louder. "Amara! Amara!" Their voices fueled her, a chorus of support she had rarely known in her life. But the officers weren't finished. "Get up!" Carter barked, his pride in tatters. His wrist still throbbed from her earlier strike, but his fury burned brighter than his pain. "We end this now!" Daniels, still clutching his ribs, forced himself upright. Harris limped beside him, rage on his face, though his body betrayed weakness. Together, they moved to flank her. Blake rose slowly, his cold eyes sharper than before, humiliation driving him forward. Amara shifted her weight, her ears painting a perfect map of their movements. Carter's heavy breathing in front, Daniel's uneven shuffle to her left, Harris dragging his injured leg to the right, and Blake, recovering but dangerous, closing from behind. 4 directions, 4 threats. For the first time her pulse quickened, but fear didn't control her, it sharpened her focus. Carter lunged first, swinging wildly. Amara ducked, her fist striking his chest. At the same moment Daniels reached, only to catch a back kick to the stomach. Harris tried to grab her from the side, but Amara twisted, driving her knee into his thigh. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound deafening. But then Blake struck. His arm wrapped tight around her from behind, locking her in a chokehold. Gasps filled the air. The crowd shouted in panic. Blake's voice hissed in her ear, cold and venomous. "Now, let's see you fight without air," the crowd screamed as Officer Blake tightened his chokehold around Amara Johnson's neck. Her body tensed, her breath cut short. Carter smirked, regaining his confidence, while Daniels and Harris laughed weakly through their own pain. "She's done!" Carter shouted triumphantly. "The show's over!" But the crowd wasn't convinced. "Fight, Amara!" someone cried. Dozens of voices followed, chanting her name louder, willing her not to give in. Amara's lungs burned, but her father's words cut through the haze. In the darkest moment, "Stay calm. Panic is defeat. Control the moment, and you control the fight." She forced herself to steady. Instead of struggling wildly, she focused on Blake's grip, the shift of his forearm against her throat, the placement of his weight behind her. She dropped her chin slightly, giving herself a sliver of space to breathe. Then, in one swift motion, she stomped down hard on his foot. Blake grunted, loosening his hold just enough. Amara seized the chance. She bent forward, hooking her arm behind his elbow, and rolled her body in a practiced throw. The plaza erupted as Blake soared over her shoulder, slamming into the pavement with a thunderous crash. The chokehold was broken. Amara staggered forward, gasping for breath, but her stance remained unshaken. She turned her head toward the sound of Blake groaning on the ground. "You'll never control me," she said, her voice hoarse but powerful. The crowd cheered wildly, the chant of her name echoing louder than ever. Carter's face paled with rage. Daniels and Harris exchanged uncertain glances, their courage unraveling. For the first time, the four officers looked less like a wall of authority and more like men on the edge of defeat. And Amara? She looked like victory. The plaza shook with the sound of voices chanting Amara Johnson's name. Strangers who had once pitied her blindness now raised fists in support, their phones capturing the historic moment. Officer Carter, his pride shredded, staggered forward, pointing a trembling finger at her. "She's resisting! Arrest her!" he shouted desperately, but his voice cracked, drowned by the roar of the crowd. Daniels tried to echo him, wheezing through bruised ribs. "Yeah, she's dangerous." But his words faltered under the glares of dozens of onlookers. Harris, limping heavily, stayed silent, his earlier bravado gone. Blake sat on the ground, dazed, blood on his lip, his cold aura broken. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Amara turned slowly, her ears catching every sound. She stood firm, breathing evenly despite the fight. "You attacked me, you mocked me, and still you lost." Her words carried across the plaza like a verdict. The crowd erupted in cheers again, louder than ever. Phones flashed. A woman near the front shouted, "It's all on video, every second of it." Carter's face drained of color. He finally understood the reality. Their authority couldn't protect them from the truth caught on dozens of cameras. Daniels shifted nervously. "Carter, this is bad, really bad," Harris whispered. "We're done." Amara bent down briefly, retrieving her cane from the pavement. She tapped it twice, the sound sharp, defiant. "You thought blindness made me weak. But today you see the truth. I am stronger than you ever imagined." The plaza roared, the sound shaking the officers more than her strikes ever had. For the first time, Carter, Blake, Daniels, and Harris looked trapped, not by her hands, but by their own downfall. The crowd that had once laughed at Maya's expense now stood frozen in silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. The four officers, O'Connor, Miller, Hayes, and Roberts, were on the ground, groaning in defeat, their arrogance shattered. Maya adjusted her sunglasses, her cane resting lightly by her side, her calm composure more powerful than any words could. Chief Daniels arrived at the scene, summoned by the commotion. He stepped forward, glaring at his disgraced officers. "You've shamed this badge and everything it's meant to stand for," he said coldly. "Effective immediately. You're all suspended pending investigation." His voice carried finality, and the onlookers erupted into cheers. Justice, long overdue, was finally being served. Maya stood quietly as people gathered around her, offering words of respect and admiration. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of judgment lifting. A young girl tugged gently at her sleeve and whispered, "You're my hero." The words pierced through Maya's heart, igniting a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, news of the incident spread rapidly. Reporters praised her courage, while community leaders called for reforms within the police department. Maya, however, wasn't interested in fame. She simply wanted to live with dignity and to prove that blindness did not mean weakness. As she walked home, cane tapping confidently, she reflected on her journey. "They thought my blindness made me vulnerable," she whispered to herself. But it only sharpened my strength. Though she bore the scars of cruelty, Maya had emerged victorious, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been underestimated. Her story was no longer one of humiliation, but of power, resilience, and undeniable triumph. The city would never forget the day a blind black girl turned her pain into a weapon and stood taller than anyone had dared to imagine.